overview effect. I think we need that effect. Like, imagine what our world would be like if every single one of us on this planet could see from the outside like that. And yet I think it is a gift just to be alive at this time in history. We're in this really small sliver of history where we've even gone to the moon. We've even been to outer space. And we know that it's possible. We know that you can see the Earth from the outside. And, that's just something that is really profound for me. I happen to be a round earther. If there's any flat earthers here, we respect everyone and all beliefs. That's just what I happen to be, and so that, it really affects me. But I think, this idea of being able to see the Earth as one continuous object, as one place, it really brings about a non-dual state, a state of oneness, an idea and a concept of unity. That's really what this series that we're in is about. Yesterday was Earth Day, and I think it's kind of funny that we just take one day to celebrate the Earth, this thing that makes all days possible. All life comes from it, and we're like, oh, we'll give you one day. Thank you for all you do, all your hard work. Here's a gift card to Subway. Thank you so much. You're awesome. You're cool. There's a lot of ways that we could talk about the Earth. I hope to do series in the future where we could just spend an entire month talking about the planet, how it supports us, how beautiful and amazing it is. But because we are in this series about non-duality, we can look at the Earth as a picture of non-duality, as a non-duality in and of itself. If you weren't here last week, we began this new series, The Field, talking about how we live in a world of duality. We live in a world of us and them, of you and me, of red and blue, of black and white. It's true of our society. We look around and everything is split into categories, everything's separated by so many different things. And yet it's also true of us. Think about our brains. We tend to look at the world and we naturally just label things, and we try to understand and control our experience of life through labels, through categories. And yet, our spiritual traditions, at their root, at their core, they speak of a oneness, a unity that's present, but maybe a little bit hard to recognize sometimes. Now, I want to be clear, it's a unity, but it's not a uniformity. It's not that everything needs to look and act and sound exactly the same, but it's the reality that we are beneath it all connected and interconnected with one another. And really the inspiration behind the name of this series is this. This is just a little quote from a larger poem of Rumi, and it goes like this. It just says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." That field. Let's go there together. Now, I think when we're talking about entering into this space where we can drop our labels and drop our categories, a lot of this conversation has to do with where we derive our sense of self. And just because we're doing a little bit of a journey, an orbit journey around the Earth today, I'll use this metaphor. Where is your center of gravity? We all maybe have had moments in life, or maybe we know people who really have derived their sense of self and find their center of gravity in their career. Maybe it's financial status. Maybe it's past achievements in life. Maybe it's something you've belonged to. Maybe it's a religion, and that's where your center of gravity lies. Maybe it's like a sports team. I mean, it's not exactly like this in the States, but it can be. But you look at like Europe, and when someone's like soccer, football, like when the wrong team loses, cars get flipped over. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a lot of sense of self coming from something external to you, and we find security in these things. In a sense, we know who we are because of these identities. But spiritual traditions, would often call these identities part of the small self, meaning who you really are is so much larger than these things that we often derive our sense of self from. And this takes us back to the overview effect. There was research done on the overview effect a few years back, and what they found is that there's a lot of connections between the overview effect and non-dual states. The research says this: the overview effect may trigger more powerful subjective states, most notably self-transcendent experiences, STEs. STEs are temporary feelings of unity characterized by reduced self-salience and increased feelings of connection. In a study that asked subjects to write about intense spiritual experiences, those who indicated that their experiences had a self-transcendent or mystical aspect described them using more socially and spatially inclusive language. In other words, during these kind of experiences, people can feel a sense of connection with other individuals, humankind, and even the entirety of existence. STEs are generally positive and can even be transformative, with some subjects reporting them to be among the most important experiences in their lives. So often when we're talking about transcendence, what we really mean is self-transcendence, transcending the small self. And the great thing is, you don't need to be able to go to space to have this type of experience. It can show up all over the place in our lives. When have you experienced an STE? Not an STD, an STE. I had to. I'm sorry. I had to. You were all thinking it. He had the courage. Self-transcendent experiences. Birth of a child. Maybe it was a trip across the world and you saw different people in a different place living life, and you realized despite our cultural differences, we're really having the same experience of reality. Maybe that helped you get out of the small self. I know for me, sometimes it's something as simple as going on an airplane. Hear me out. I love the window seat, okay? And I think it boggles my mind when people go and get their window seat and then they close the shutter. I can't. For most of history, for most of all of time that humans have been on this planet, we have never seen this vantage point. And then you have people who get on there and they're like, no, I'd rather watch Game of Thrones on my iPad. It's like, I can't wrap my head around it. So we have these moments where maybe literally we see the world from a different vantage point. We transcend the self. And yet naturally, there always comes a time where unfortunately we tend to descend back into the small self. You know those moments where maybe you went on a trip or you went on a retreat and then you come back home and there's that first moment, maybe it takes a day or two, maybe it's just a couple of hours where you kind of are like, you have that first argument or that first snap, and you're like, oh, there I am, I'm back, okay. It's kind of discouraging. But it happens to all of us. Why does this happen? Well, the truth is it comes down to our biology. See, as humans, we have ancestors that go back as far as 2 million years ago. But as Homo sapiens, as we are now, we have ancestors, or Homo sapiens kind of show up on the scene around 300,000 years ago. So when we talk about how our brain has developed over time, and we talk about the potential for our brain to evolve, we're not talking about hundreds or thousands of years. We're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. In essence, what I'm saying is that we have very old hardware, okay? This is why modern life can be so difficult. It's almost like we're trying to run social media on one of these. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work. You probably, maybe you've looked at, your husband and you've thought, he's such a caveman sometimes. Here's the thing, he is a caveman, okay? So are you. You are too. He's just a caveman in Eddie Bauer, okay? Give him some grace. Or we all remember these guys.
It's so easy to use Geico.com. A caveman could do it.
What?
Oh, no,
Not cool.
I did not know you were there. I could.
Oh, I love those. We share some of the basic needs as early humans. We have some of the same drives as the humans that were running around throwing spears at woolly mammoths, okay? We're not too different from them. And those needs are safety and security. And our greatest tool for achieving those things is our sense of judgment, our ability to judge reality. This is how we'd be walking along in the forest and we'd see two different colors of berries, and we're like, okay, the red berry gave me diarrhea. I'm not going to eat that one again. The blueberry is safe, Or it's how we were able to judge, like, this animal is a friend. This animal, it can be food, and then this animal, I need to run. Like this, I need to outrun this animal. Food, shelter, these are the basic needs of our ancestors, and yet we share so many of them. Because another thing we have in common is this aspect of our brain called the limbic system. And the limbic system is responsible for our emotional responses, particularly in survival, fight or flight. And so what the limbic system does is it allows us to categorize reality based on past experiences. So like, you got food poisoning at an Arby's, and you're now going to say, all Arby's are bad. I'm never going back. Which is true, all Arby's are bad, but that's not the point I'm making. I'm losing my potential for sponsorship by Arby's, but it's probably okay. See, self-transcendence, what it does is it brings us to an open and an inclusive place. And yet, our limbic system brings us back down. It constricts us. It kind of takes us into a more restrictive understanding and view of reality. Like, if you've ever felt in danger, it's most likely that you've kind of physically constricted. Well, part of that is because we're protecting the neck, protect the sensitive parts of your body. It's just a natural response. You might be thinking, what does this actually have to do with spirituality? Okay, I'm getting there. See, we no longer are running from saber-toothed tigers on a daily basis. We're no longer trying to discern which foods are and are not poisonous. Unless I'm cooking, then we are. But we're still negotiating safety. We're still trying to figure out, am I safe? Am I secure? Now, because of the way that technology and modern life has changed, it's moved from a more literal sense of safety to a symbolic sense of safety. And this can be really understood through an incredible model of looking at how we move across these dynamics. In 1943, Abraham Maslow, a psychologist, he put forth this idea known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, if you can come up with something this great, then you can definitely name it after yourself. I get it. It's okay. And what Maslow is saying is that we go up this triangle depending on which needs are met. So we begin, I found out I have a laser pointer. So it's a new era for us here at Aldea, okay? Step 1, new pastor. Step 2, laser pointer. We need to get our physiological needs met in order to have any kind of normal experience of life. And if we can just get our body what it needs, food, water, warmth, rest, then we can move to more safety needs, such as, am I secure, am I safe? Is my shelter actually going to protect me against things down the road? So these first two are known as basic needs. You'll notice that each step we move up, things get a little more abstract. They go from very direct and literal, little more abstract. Even safety is thinking about the future. But then we move into psychological needs. We have belongingness and love needs. So relationships, friends. From there, we go to esteem needs, prestige, and a feeling of accomplishment. And at the top of the triangle, self-fulfillment needs, or self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. Now, something very important to understand about Maslow's hierarchy, and it may help you understand all kinds of different human dynamics, is this: you can't skip steps, okay? And you're really only going to be concerned with the level that you're on. So, for example, someone who does not have food, water, shelter, someone who's living on the street and is wondering where they're going to sleep tonight is not going to be concerned with whether or not they're achieving their full creative potential. And the vice versa, if you're thinking like, am I achieving my purpose? Am I living up to my full creativity? If that's where your center of gravity is, if those are where your main concerns are, it's probably very unlikely that you're also figuring out where your next meal is coming from. We move linearly along this scale. But what's interesting, and you've probably noticed this, even if we're up here, our need for security and safety doesn't just go away. It's still there. It's embedded within our consciousness. All of these things still remain even as we go up the ladder. And part of that comes back to the limbic system. There's another word for the limbic system, and it's often considered to be our lizard brain or our reptilian brain. And part of this is because this is the part of our brain that first developed and engaged survival, and so it's something that we share with reptiles. We have this same thing in common. Now, I just want to be clear. I love lizards. I'm not bad-mouthing reptiles, okay? I'm a big reptile person. I had a lizard growing up, and I was a victim with one of those situations where the lizard dies and then your parents try to replace it with another one that looks exactly the same, and I caught them. I mean, I didn't see it happen, but I knew. My first lizard was named Flame, and then I just came home one day and I was like, that's not Flame. So I renamed it Puff, and it was a bearded dragon, so it was Puff the dragon. And then only now in my late 20s have I understood what that actually means. But what this is, this connection with lizards, this lizard brain, this reptilian brain, what it is we are still negotiating and looking for safety and security. It's just that we find it in different ways now. We find it in our identities because we want to guarantee not just that we're going to have food and provisions for today, but that we're going to have it tomorrow and for the rest of our lives. So again, the way that we find our security becomes more abstract. Instead of hunting for your next meal, it's more like, how big is my savings account? What is my social status? And what's interesting is this striving for safety. In a way, it becomes a buffer. It's a form of trying to control reality. See, safety and this need for security might protect us from danger, but it also, in a way, insulates us from the fullest experience of life. Because when we're spending all this time trying to figure out, am I safe? Am I secure in this world? We're also we're living at a distance from our own lives. It's like we're on the outside. I don't know if you've ever felt like this, that you were on the outside of your life watching for danger, but you weren't actually living it. You might have been this person, or you might have someone in your life where you would say, it feels like they have a lot of armor on. It feels like they're a little bit guarded. Well, it's likely that that person is spending a lot of time and energy detecting threats. And this tendency comes from childhood. Looking back at my upbringing, I'm very fortunate that there was always food on the table. But there were moments in my life where I was thinking, are we actually secure as a family? In 2008, financial crisis, and my dad was a teacher in Los Angeles school district, and there were people getting laid off by the thousands. And, we were worried, and I internalized this feeling of like, what's going to happen? What does my future look like? And in a sense, those moments of instability at a young age, they teach us and they train us to kind of go inward and to sort of go into a self-protective place, a very limbic place. And yet I tend to think that the energy that we spend on trying to figure out if we're safe and we're secure is also energy not spent on actually living our lives. Because the truth is this, I hate to break it to you, but the world is not always a safe place. You've heard the saying, none of us get out of here alive. If you haven't, congratulations. That's your first time hearing it. When we were getting prepared to move here to Arizona, it started to dawn on us that there were actually a lot of creatures and plant life out here that either wanted to kill us or could kill us, you know? Actually, the other day, we were hiking with some friends, and we both had our dogs, and we were letting them hike off leash, which we were not supposed to do, so that's our first mistake, and that's on us. But the dogs were starting to kind of approach some bushes, and I had stopped paying attention for a second, and then all of a sudden I hear, and I'm like, what? And I turn my head, and I see a rattlesnake, full spring attack mode, inches away from not my dog, but our friend's dog, which felt a little better, but, you know, I wouldn't tell him that. Inches away, full attack mode. And I just ran over there, and I didn't even have the proper words, like, rattlesnake, do something, get the dog. I just went, oh my God. You know, I don't know. Like the speech part of the brain was not active. I was all reptile brain in that moment, which ironically, the snake was a reptile too. But anyway, we got the dogs like in the nick of time. I tackled my dog. She didn't like it at the time, but I said, I'm doing this because I love you. And now I understand parenting, you know, and so, but here's here's the moral. We need to be smart, okay? We need to be aware. We still want to put our seatbelt on. But the thing is there's this aspect where if we can understand that the world isn't always a safe place, it doesn't mean that we need to hide from the world. The great Indian guru and saint Ramana Maharshi said it this way: wanting to reform the world without discovering one's true self is like trying to cover the world with leather to avoid the pain of walking on stones and thorns. It is much simpler to wear shoes. How many moments in our lives have we subconsciously been trying to change the world instead of changing ourselves? Or how many times are we waiting for the world to get covered in leather before we say we're going to walk out the outside, you know? They need to change. This needs to change. But it's up to us. We can take responsibility. Again, wearing shoes, it's the practical thing to do. But then we can engage with the world with some common sense. There's a great legendary children's book series called The Chronicles of Narnia. You probably have heard of it. And C.S. Lewis really writes this beautiful allegory. A lot of it's tied to some Christian imagery and symbology. And if you all remember, Aslan is the lion, and he's also sort of like this image of God. And in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there's this really well-known scene where, there are these four siblings, and the youngest is sweet little Lucy, and they're being taken to go see Aslan. And you got to remember, most of the characters in this book are talking animals, so that just gives you a little context. And Lucy asks Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, she goes, Aslan, he sounds actually kind of scary and intimidating, but he's safe, right? Like, he's safe. And Miss Beaver looks back and she says, he's not safe. Why would you ever have thought that he was safe? But he is good. And sometimes I think that is so true about life, about reality, maybe even your concept of God or the divine. It's not necessarily always safe, but it is good because it's a gift. This life is a gift. The promise was never that it was going to be easy or perfectly safe all the time, but it's here. It's here for the taking. Sometimes I think about life as a gift, like when kids get that Christmas gift, like Christmas morning under the tree, and they unwrap the gift, and it's this wonderful exchange, and it's like, here you go. Here's this beautiful gift. And then 5 minutes later, someone asks to see it, and the kid's like, no, it's mine. That's how we are with life sometimes. We try to control it, even though the whole thing is a gift. See, non-dual spirituality, it isn't about ignoring danger. Yes, it's about this sense of oneness, but it's not saying, oh, I'm one with oncoming traffic. It's about recognizing that, yes, we live in a world of duality. But if we look at a deeper level, we can see that the earth is not just something that I exist on or something that I can take from endlessly. It's actually a system that I belong to. And indigenous spirituality gets this so well. They get that there's a give and take of balance with our relationship to the earth. And a huge part of that is indigenous spirituality is defined by land-based living, meaning that their entire lives, spirituality and everything else, is based on their relationship with the land that they occupied. That stream is where we get our water and where we get some of our food. That forest is where we get some of our wood and our sustenance. Yet you and I, we don't exactly get that. We go like, that Whole Foods is where I get my cottage cheese. We don't have this connected relationship to the land. Spending some time in Seattle, I learned a bit about the Duwamish people who were the original occupants of that land, and their chief, where you get the name Seattle, Chief Seattle. And he has this really wonderful quote about this sense of interconnection. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Hearing this quote, doesn't it make you think that we are now on a point in history where we've kind of lost our connection to this reality? It's why we're experiencing unprecedented ecological disaster, but also just an unprecedented sense of isolation and loneliness. I am optimistic and hopeful that we can find our way back. Not just from the ecological problems, but see, even our environmental issues and our political issues, I believe that they are based on really issues of spirituality. They're problems about where our center of gravity as a people, where that lies. And so I believe that we need experiences, we need practices, we need reframing that leads us to a self-transcendence and a non-dual state. See, maybe for you that actually meant leaving the church or the religion that you grew up in, because leaving was actually a way that freed you up to experience reality in a more direct way. Maybe for you it's meant coming back to a place where people gather in spiritual community and have some ritual and have a sense of sacredness. Maybe for you it's been learning more and digging into science. Or maybe for you it's been trying to unlearn beliefs that have defined the way that you've looked at the world and looked at yourself and got in the way of a more true and direct experience of reality. I want to end with this. The author and legendary science communicator Carl Sagan was known for a mini-series called Cosmos that aired in the 1980s. And at the time, it was the most widely watched television show that had ever been aired. And in it, he gives this incredible speech. And I just want to close by sharing this with you, if you'll just take a moment and listen to this. Yeah. If we get nothing else today, I just hope that we would remember our place on this planet. That we'd remember the miracle that we are even here. That we'd remember how beautiful this place is and also how fragile it is. And so in that we would cherish this life, that we cherish one another. It was never promised that it would be perfectly safe, but it is a gift. It is beautiful. And so I just want to encourage you today to let some of those words sink in. That's something that really has always been really helpful for me. It's just a helpful reminder. It's free on YouTube, so anytime you're feeling a little down, and you're worried about something and you're like, maybe I shouldn't be so worried about this thing. Just pop that on. It'll kind of take you back to the gift of being here at all. How incredible. What a gift. I'm so glad that you were here in this room today, that we could share this experience together. And I'm going to transition us into our discussion groups. And so we have more tables out. So we have primarily tables. So it should be easy to just join a table, or if you want to turn the chairs around. And our questions for today are going to be this. Have you had something that you would consider a self-transcendent experience? And what do you think about Carl Sagan's The Pale Blue Dot speech? All right.